I found out my best friend of 12 years is a multimillionaire movie star. And the worst part isn't even the lie itself. It's the fact that I spent the last decade paying for his meals, because I thought he was literally starving. Have you ever felt like your entire reality was just a scripted performance? Or that the person you trusted most in the world was actually a stranger, wearing a very convincing mask? I'm sitting here in a hotel room that costs more than my annual salary, staring at NDAs I refused to sign, wondering if I was ever actually his friend or just his favorite piece of relatable scenery. Was I wrong for losing my mind when the truth came out? Or would you have felt just as betrayed if you realized your struggling roommate was actually the lead in the biggest franchise on the planet? To understand how deep this goes, I have to go back to the beginning, back to when I met Leo. We were freshmen in college, both theater majors, though he always seemed a bit more grounded than the rest of the ego-driven crowd. While everyone else was bragging about their summer intensives or their parents' connections, Leo was the guy who worked the late shift at the campus library and wore the same 3 thrifted flannels every single week. He was charming, sure, but in a quiet, unassuming way. We bonded over a shared love for obscure indie films and the fact that we were both broke. Or at least, that's what I thought. I remember one night specifically during sophomore year, when we were both studying for finals. He told me he hadn't eaten in 2 days because his paycheck hadn't cleared. I felt so bad for him that I gave him half of my grocery budget for the month. He looked me in the eyes, nearly tearing up, and told me I was a lifesaver. Looking back now, that performance deserved an Oscar, because at that very moment, he probably had a trust fund that could have bought the entire grocery store. We spent our college years inseparable, sharing cheap ramen and dreaming of the big stage. I remember we once sat on the roof of our dorm, staring at the stars, and he told me that all he wanted was to be able to afford a decent pair of boots one day. I actually felt a lump in my throat listening to him. I thought we were in the trenches together, 2 artists against the world. When he struggled with his lines, I stayed up all night running scenes with him. When he didn't have money for the bus to go visit his sick aunt in the countryside, I dipped into my savings to buy his ticket. Every single gesture of kindness I offered was met with such humble gratitude that it made me want to help him even more. It's sickening now to realize that every one of those struggles was likely a calculated move to keep the charade going. After graduation, the real world hit hard. I landed a marketing job that I hated just to keep us afloat in a tiny, cramped apartment in the city. Leo, meanwhile, was always on the verge of his big break. He would come home from auditions looking absolutely defeated, throwing his bag on the floor and sighing about how the industry only cares about looks and not talent. I would sit there, pouring him a drink, telling him that his time would come, and that he was the most talented person I knew. I felt a sense of pride in supporting him, like I was the silent partner in a great destiny. But the destiny he was living was already happening behind my back. He started taking these seasonal jobs, on fishing boats in Alaska, or as a guide in the deep woods of Canada. He said it was the only way to make $5,000 or $6,000 in a go, so he could survive the next 6 months of auditions. I believed him because he would come back looking rugged and exhausted. Little did I know, those months away weren't spent on a boat. They were spent on closed movie sets in London, Atlanta, and New Zealand. While I was sitting in a cubicle worrying about how we were going to pay the heating bill in January, he was literally being pampered in a private trailer, getting his makeup done for a $100 million production. The psychological toll of this realization is what hurts the most. Every time he borrowed $20 for a haircut, every time I let him have the bigger portion of dinner because he looked thin, he was laughing at me. Maybe not out loud, but he was letting me play the role of the provider while he was arguably one of the wealthiest men of our generation. I remember once he came back from a fishing trip and gave me a small carved wooden bird. He said he'd spent hours making it on the boat because he was thinking of me. I kept that bird on my nightstand for 3 years. I found out yesterday that those birds are actually merchandise from his second movie, and he probably just grabbed a handful from the craft services table. The level of detail he put into the lie is what makes me question my own sanity. How can you look someone in the eye for a decade and never let the mask slip? We had deep, late-night conversations about life, love, and our fears. He told me his greatest fear was being forgotten. My greatest fear was not being able to take care of the people I love. He used my fear against me to make his lie more believable. He knew I wouldn't ask questions if he looked like he was in need. There were signs, though. Signs I was too blinded by loyalty to see. Like the time I saw him getting into a very expensive car 3 blocks from our apartment. When I asked him about it later, he said he'd called an Uber Black by accident, and the driver felt sorry for him, and gave him a ride anyway. Or the time he had a stunt injury on his arm, a massive bruise, and claimed he tripped down the subway stairs. He was actually filming a high-octane fight scene that would later be seen by millions. I even watched one of his movies. It was a sci-fi epic where the lead actor wears a full-face helmet and a voice modulator for the entire film. I sat in the theater with Leo, and he actually leaned over to me and said, "Man, I wish I could get a gig like that. Imagine the paycheck." He was watching himself on the screen, sitting next to his best friend, and making jokes about his own wealth. The sheer sociopathic nature of that moment sends chills down my spine. He wasn't just lying, he was performing for an audience of one. Me. Think about the level of commitment that takes. To sit in a theater, watch yourself dominate the screen in a global blockbuster, and then walk out and ask your friend to cover the cost of the popcorn because you're a bit short this week. It's not just a lie at that point, it's a sickness. I spent years of my life living in a state of constant financial stress, partly because I was trying to support 2 grown men on one modest salary. I skipped vacations, I wore clothes until they were threadbare, and I never treated myself to anything nice because I felt guilty doing so when my best friend was struggling just to eat. And all that time, he was flying on private jets and staying in 5-star hotels under an alias. I remember a specific winter where our heater broke. It was freezing, and we couldn't afford the repairman. We huddled in the living room with 3 layers of blankets, drinking cheap tea. Leo looked at me and said, "This is what builds character, man. We're going to look back on this and laugh when we're successful." He was right about one thing. He was already successful. He could have fixed that heater with the pocket change he had in his designer jeans that were hidden in a storage unit somewhere. But he chose to let me freeze. He chose to let me suffer for the sake of his character building. It's that realization that keeps me awake at night. He didn't just lie about his name or his job. He lied about our shared reality. He created a fake world of struggle for me to live in so he could feel like he was real. Every time I comforted him after a bad day, every time I gave him a pep talk when he was depressed about his career, I was just pouring my genuine emotions into a black hole of deception. He was probably mentally rehearsing his next monologue while I was crying over his fake failures. I feel like a fool, a massive, monumental fool. I've gone back through my old journals, looking at entries where I wrote about how worried I was for Leo's future. I wrote about how I hoped I'd get a promotion so I could help him out more. Seeing those words now is like a knife to the heart. I was so sincere, so genuinely invested in his well-being, while he was treating me like a background extra in the movie of his life. How do you even begin to process that? How do you look at 12 years of memories and not see them as tainted? Every birthday, every holiday, every shared triumph, it was all part of the act. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, how I finally caught him and the insane confrontation that followed, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you be able to forgive a friend who lied to protect the friendship? Or would you see it as the ultimate betrayal of trust? I'm reading every single comment, because I still don't know if I'm the one being unreasonable here. The breaking point came when I was cleaning the apartment while he was supposedly in the wilderness. I found a burner phone tucked inside an old pair of sneakers. It started buzzing, and a message popped up on the screen. It was from a famous director. It said, "The reshoots are scheduled for Tuesday. The private jet will be at the usual hangar. Don't be late, Julian." Julian Sterling. The name hit me like a physical blow. I spent the next 6 hours in a rabbit hole of internet research. I compared birthmarks, ear shapes, and height. It was him. It was undeniably him. When the door finally opened and he walked in, pretending to be exhausted from his hard labor, I didn't say a word. I just held up the phone. The transformation in his face was terrifying. The Leo persona dropped instantly. His posture changed, his voice dropped an octave, and suddenly, The person standing in my kitchen was a stranger. He didn't even apologize at first. His first instinct was to call his manager. Within 20 minutes, my small apartment was filled with people in suits. They offered me money, a life-changing amount of money, to sign a document saying I would never reveal his true identity. They called it standard procedure. Leo stood in the corner, looking at his reflection in our cracked hallway mirror, adjusting his expensive jacket that he'd hidden in a gym bag. He told me he did it because he needed to know someone loved him for him, not for his fame. I told him that he didn't give me a choice to love him. He gave me a character to love. He stole 12 years of my life to feed his own ego and call it staying grounded. I didn't take the check. I threw it in his face and told him that if he ever contacted me again, I'd make sure every tabloid on earth knew his humble origin story was a fraud. The aftermath has been a nightmare. I've had to move, change my number, and I'm constantly looking over my shoulder for his legal team. He sent me letters through his lawyers, trying to explain that the Julian Sterling persona is a brand he has to protect, but all I see is a man who was too afraid to be real with his best friend. He even had the nerve to send a representative to my new workplace to try and negotiate a settlement. They offered to pay off my student loans, buy me a car, and set up a trust fund for me. But every time they added another zero to the offer, I just felt more insulted. They were trying to buy my forgiveness, trying to turn my genuine anger into a business transaction. I told them to leave and never come back. I've realized that Leo, or Julian, is surrounded by people who say yes to him. He's forgotten what it's like to have someone tell him the truth. He thinks he can script this ending too. But I'm not playing my part anymore. I've spent the last few days talking to a therapist, trying to untangle my own identity from the one he created for me. It's hard. I keep thinking about all the times I could have used that money he was hiding. I think about my mother's medical bills that I struggled to pay while he was sitting on millions. I think about the times I felt like a failure because I couldn't do more for him. The guilt I felt was real, even if the reason for it was a lie. And that's what I can't forgive. He let me carry the weight of his poverty on my shoulders while he was flying high. That's not protection. That's cruelty. He claims he wanted to keep our friendship pure. But there is nothing pure about a relationship built on a mountain of deception. Every time I look at a movie poster now, I feel a wave of nausea. I see the faces of actors and I wonder who they're lying to. I wonder how many Leos are out there, using regular people as anchors to a reality they've long since abandoned. I'm moving on, but the scars are deep. I've started a new job in a different city, and I don't tell anyone about my past. I'm afraid that if I tell the truth, they'll think I'm the crazy one. But I know what I saw. I know the man I lived with for a decade. And I know that he was never really there at all. Looking back, the most painful part isn't the money I spent or the lies I was told. It's the realization that the person I thought was my brother never really existed. He was just a role. And once the scene was over, he walked off the set and left me behind in the wreckage. If there's a lesson here, it's that sometimes the people we want to save are the ones who are actually holding all the cards. Don't let your kindness be someone else's playground. Like this video if you were on my side, and think I was right to walk away from the money. Subscribe for more stories like this where the truth is stranger than fiction. And share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did he owe me more than just money? Was I just a prop in his movie? I'll see you all in the next story.